Today's session is all about IPECS, but before I go into IPECS in detail, I just want to cover off our overall portfolio and really give you a feel for where IPECS has come from and where it's built on, and why it's an important move for LG Nortel in terms of the portfolio in the UK. Most of you, or many of you, will know our IPLDK range, our IP-enabled PBX range, going all the way from the Aria Soho, which is a 3x8 analog telephone system, through to our IPLDK 300E, which is taking you up to almost 600 extensions. Still very much a core part of the portfolio for us, and really critical, not only for today's business but future business, because many of our customers and new customers rely on traditional telephony, and IP is not something that those customers want to use. Sitting next to that is IPECS, our pure IP PBX, and today we'll go into that in detail. I'll go through the various call servers, the various different modules, the applications, and some of the USPs of IPECS and why IPECS in the last 3 months has been so successful. As I go through today, I will also touch on some applications. Now, applications are always important, as determined. We do have our own sidetrack application suite, but we also work with many of the third-party vendors in the UK, but we do have our own sidetrack application suite, and I'll show you a case study later where we use that to very good effect. And finally, some of the wraparound. One of the benefits of dealing with Capstone is that we're a single vendor focused business. So we only do LG Nortel, and we're entirely focused on LG Nortel. So that means that we do everything for LG Nortel in the UK. So we are basically LG Nortel in the UK. So we do all the stock control, all the logistics, all the repairs, all the warranty. So we are a one-stop shop, and that's why many of you really enjoy dealing with us, because we are a single vendor focus and we give it that 100% focus. So now moving on to IPECS. Now, I'm not a slide reader, so I will only pick out some of the things that are important. And in this slide, just in the middle there is what I believe to be the most important thing that IPECS has delivered for us. And it's been developed from a fully featured TDM PBX. What does that mean? LG have spent the last 20 years developing from GSX, GDK, LDK, IPLDK, their PBX range, and all those traditional voice features. And when they developed IPECS, they didn't forget that. They actually took all that development, and that was the starting point of IPECS. So IPECS has given us a pure IP switch, with traditional voice features. And as all of you probably know better than me, the vast majority of customers desire those traditional voice features. So for me, that's the #1 point. I think the other thing I would like to try and bring out today is how feature-rich IPECS really is. Today I'll labour on points like ACD queuing, mobile integration, IP soft phones, all of these things which really make IPECS, especially when you start looking at its pricing, a really unique proposition. So a fully featured PBX with a very cost-effective price. So moving on, is that the slide shows us 4 call servers. In reality, we've actually got 5 call servers. Okay, and these are all the heart of our IPECS solution. We have the MFIM50A and B, the MFIM100, the MFIM300, and the MFIM600. And very much like we did and do with IPLDK, the feature set is uniform across the entire range. So that makes it very easy to understand. It makes speaking to customers about it very easy, and you know, it doesn't matter if it's a 10 extension sale or a 500 extension sale, you're actually talking about the same features. And the benefit for the smaller customers, they get big system features for a small price. The bigger call servers obviously take us up to 600 port solutions, where the MFIM50 is a 50 port solution. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to build an IPECS. Now normally when I come out and see you guys, I'll physically build that in front of you. Well, today I'm going to build it on the slide. Now one of the critical things about IPECS is that it uses the LAN as the infrastructure and the backbone. And many of you will have seen the IPECS call server, the MFIM, and it's no more than the size of a book. And that's the same for the MFIM50 and the MFIM 600. So it plugs into the LAN, and the LAN in most cases will plug into an internet connection, be it DSL, MPLS or something similar. So how do we build a solution? We then plug our IP phones into the LAN switch, and that connects back to the call server. A really important point here is that the IP phones do not plug directly into the call server. They use the LAN as the backbone. Alright, really important. When building a solution, it's absolutely critical. And when people see the MFIM50 or the MFIM 600 to start off with, they say, well, where do all the phones plug? The phones do not plug into the call server. And you'll see later why that's absolutely critical and an important part of the technology and how we can deliver the solutions we deliver. So lines. I mentioned earlier on that it's really important the pedigree of LG Nortel in terms of the voice features. So IPECS can deal with analog lines, ISDN2 lines, ISDN30 lines, and of course SIP trunks. Some of the MFIMs have these technologies built in, and some of the solutions use extra modules to deliver these solutions. But what's critical for me is that no matter where the customer is in their line technology, be it using analog or using SIP, IPECS can deal with that. And in reality, you could have an IPECS solution that could have analog lines, ISDN2 lines, ISDN30 lines and SIP lines all in the one solution. Analog extensions. Every IPECS that we sell has analog extensions on it. There might be the odd 1% that doesn't have an analog extension. Analog extensions are still critical to UK business. So IPECS, still a pure IP switch, will support analog extensions. Not only support it, it will support it with caller ID. And very simply, we don't have to use, for example, CPC-U4s to deliver caller ID to analog extensions. The caller ID functionality is built into IPECS. And we can support fax over IP. So the fact that we can have an analog extension of a pure IP switch, and that is actually a fax extension. And as you see later, we can go from one analog extension all the way up to hundreds of analog extensions, all hanging off a pure IP switch. Voicemail and auto attendant. In the majority of call servers, voicemail and auto attendant is actually bundled in now. Is that where IPECS has come from, it has taken what a lot of you know as standard LG Nortel voicemail and auto attendant functionality and added some really key enhancements, email notification, out-dial notification, group mailbox and things like that. But I'll probably have to remind you that, for example, the auto attendant on LG system is highly featured, and I'll give you some examples later on where it competes against some of the biggest solutions on the market. For example, an MFIM50 can give an ACD hunt group with 10 levels of skill-based routing. Some of the big, larger vendors can't do that at all. And finally, the remote IP and soft phone. Why is that important? Well, we see it important from a sales perspective. We see the number of systems being sold with remote IP extensions, be it soft phones, hard phones, PDA phones, Symbian phones, growing every week. We make it simple. One of the important things about soft phones with IPECS, and remote IP phones, we make it entirely simple. So it's not a technological nightmare, VPNs. We use the public internet. We can use VPNs if that's what the customer dictates, but we try and make it as simple as possible. So, the most complicated slide I've got, but actually for you guys, one of the most important slides you will see. And I use this as my reference point. And I will take you through it, not line by line and number by number, but I will jump on what I believe to be the most important points. And luckily I've highlighted what I'm going to talk about. First of all, ports. A simple equation for you all to remember. Ports is lines plus extensions. So when designing an IPECS system, the simple rules is that your total number of ports you're going to use in that system and that solution is all your lines and all your extensions added together. So, in a simple example, if you had 10 channels of ISDN 30, 20 IP phones and 10 analog extensions, you are using 40 ports. Alright, so all extensions and all lines add up to your ports. And you'll see, for example, in the M50B, that we have a maximum port number of 50. And at that point, the system is maxed in terms of its size. Do note that voicemail and auto attendant does not use those ports. Those ports in voicemail is absolutely exclusive to voicemail. Ports is lines plus extensions. So in the M50B, maximum ports is 50, maximum lines or trunks is 42, and maximum extensions is 50. These are all maximums. In reality, you would never get there. Now, what's key about the M50 and the M50A is that they both have lines built in. So if I look at the M50A, the M50A call server has 4 analog lines built into the box. Those lines are there, they're usable, they're what I would describe as unlicensed, and many of you will know what I mean when I say unlicensed. They are physically built in, and when you buy the box, you get those 4 analog lines. And not only do you get the 4 analog lines, they have caller ID built in as well. And of course, if you want to expand that, you can use additional modules to increase your number of analog lines. So that's the M50A. On the M50B, we have 2 ISDN2 lines, so 4 channels of ISDN2 built in, and using a license code, we can expand that up to another 4 channels. So the M50B, out of the box, the hardware can deliver 8 channels of ISDN2. Now, on the M50s, the A and B, both have 2 analog extensions built in. So they are physically built into that box. So as I said earlier, the vast majority of customers have analog requirements, be it the fax machine, the PDQ machine, the modem, a phone in the warehouse, an analog phone near the reception area, these sorts of applications. So there's 2 analog extensions built into those call servers. These can be expanded using modules, either in groups of 4, 8 and 32, and I'll touch on them in a minute. Built-in VoIP channels. You'll see in the M50 I've got 4 VoIP channels. Now these VoIP channels can be used for remote IP extensions, so Fontage soft phones connecting over the internet, or SIP channels. Alright, and again these VoIP channels can be expanded using VoIP modules. Now moving on to voicemail and auto attendant. On the M50A, the M50B and the M100 and the M300, the voicemail and auto attendant is built into the call server. So the M50B, for example, has an RRP of £710, and that includes voicemail and auto attendant. And it includes 6 ports of voicemail and 270 minutes worth of recording time. Now a little bit later on I'll talk a bit more about the voicemail and auto attendant and the functionality, but it is what I would describe as full strength, giving customers everything they want in terms of today, in terms of voicemail to email, out dial notification, group mailbox, and these sorts of things. I just want to jump on to the M100 now to really point out to you the most important thing about this slide, I feel. If you look at that M100, we have a maximum station number of 70 extensions. So some of the people out there were saying, well, why didn't they call it an M70? Well, it's too late for that. It's an M100, but it does have a maximum station number of 70 extensions. So really watch out for that when designing systems. So although you've got an M100 and you've got 100 ports, it does have an extension maximum of 70 extensions. So from my perspective, what do I do? When people come to me and say, I always ask, what's your extension size? I know where the sweet spots are. So if somebody says to me 25 extensions and 10 lines, that will fit into an M50, but if they want expansion, it might be an M100. If somebody comes to me and says, I've got a customer with 60 extensions, I always know the starting point is going to be an M300. I'm sure many of you got the pricing in front of you. When you see the pricing, it's not a huge step. But also note, on the M100, 300, there is no lines built into those call servers. There's a larger solutions, and all the lines are built on separate modules, so ISDN 30, ISDN 2, etc. And then really finally, the MFIM 600. This is a large end solution for up to 600 ports, and that is a core call server. So it has 600 ports, and all of those 600 ports are available for use. So they're not licensed. So that unit, and many of you have seen it, is the same size as an MFIM 50, but has 600 ports available. So it could take 600 extensions, obviously with no lines, or up to 400 lines, all fully open. But there's no VoIP channels and there's no voicemail built into that call server. So a slightly different solution. And I'd always recommend, when you're looking at solutions of that size, come and talk to us. Come and ask us for our help in terms of the best way to design that solution. And finally on this slide, you'll have noticed down the bottom I have a row called local survivability and system redundancy, and I've got some yeses and some nos. This is a new feature for us, and really a new feature for a lot of you guys in terms of delivering solution. I'm sure many of you have had tenders in the past where the customer has dictated that you must deliver and respond with a system that can provide redundancy. And a lot of you will have said, well, a redundant solution is actually 2 telephone systems. Want the second one all programmed up and ready to use. Well, IPECS can do all of that automatically, and later on I'll show you a quick example of how we actually delivered that type of solution. Just going back to my building blocks again, I just quickly want to talk about the MFIM 50 because it's actually the most important product in the range, because if you can understand the MFIM 50, understand what it does, how it builds, the rest becomes really easy. So I'll use the same schematic again, and I will build an MFIM 50 solution. So I've got my LAN, I've got my DSL, and I've got my MFIM 50 and its little bookends. So it's plugged into the LAN. In terms of IP phones, in theory I could plug in 50 IP phones into that LAN switch. However, on the MFIM 50, I've told you already that we've got 4 lines already built in. So at that point I have used 4 of my lines. But then, remember that I've used 2 of my extensions for the built-in analog extensions. So on the MFIM 50, I've got 4 lines built in. That may be analog lines or ISDN 2 lines, and I've got 2 analog extensions built in. So my starting point is I have 44 free ports. So in absolute practicality, I could take 44 IP phones and have a 48 port LAN switch, plug in all 44 IP phones, and I would have a working solution by only buying the hardware. So buying an MFIM 50, buying the 44 IP phones, I would have a 46 extension telephone system with 4 lines on it. Okay, so there's no tricks, there's no special things where we suddenly launch a license fee on you. Those ports are available to use. Okay, on the MFIM 50, the voicemail and auto attendant is built in, 6 ports, 270 minutes, and again that's fully opened. So we don't provide voicemail on a mailbox basis, so you don't pay a fee per mailbox. You get voicemail and auto attendant in the box, and you deliver to the customer what they want out of that technology. So it might be only that 2 people require voicemail, it might be that 22 people require voicemail, or it might be 32 people require voicemail, and you've got a little bit of auto attendant. So it's there for you to use how you want to use it. And it's not licensed, so it's fully open and you can apply it to as many extensions as you want. And finally, my remote IP phones. At Capstan at the moment we are running our telephone system on an MFIM 50 connected to ISDN 30, and we've got a number of remote IP phones. I've got 2 different soft phones, some of the directors have got Wi-Fi phones at home, so we're a heavy user of it, and a lot of you have seen me demonstrate the technology. It's robust and it is selling really, really well. In fact, we're now seeing systems sell with more soft phones than you would actually ever expect, outweighing the fixed IP phones that are actually being installed in the office. So, I've gone through the MFIM 50. What about the rest of the solution? Because the MFIM 50 is a single module, got some lines, takes me up to 50 ports. What if I'm building a bigger solution? Well, every solution will have a spinning call server. Okay, they don't all spin like that, but Every solution will have a call server, and that call server plugs into the LAN. And you'll see in this picture that all of the other modules that you build a solution with plug into the LAN. None of the modules plug directly into the call server. And this is what we call distributed architecture. And very shortly I have a slide in distributed architecture. And distributed architecture wins deals. It's not a feature, it's a technology, but it wins deals. And I'll show you later why it wins deals. Okay, so we've got an MFIM call server. So what's the choices in terms of modules? Well, the first obvious module is the primary rate. Alright, so we have a primary rate module, and then again, all 30 channels are open on that primary rate module, and you can have multiple primary rates on a single call server. So you may have a customer who has 60 channels of ISDN 30, so they could have an MFIM 300, and they could have 2 primary rate modules on that LAN and delivering 60 channels of ISDN 30. What's important with the MFIM 50 and the primary rate, you can tell the MFIM 50 how many channels you're using. So what that means is that you don't use and abuse your ports on your system. So you may have a customer who only has 8 channels of ISDN 30, so you would tell your MFIM 50 only use 8 ports because I've only got 8 channels, so that would leave you with all your other 42 ports free to use for other lines or other extensions. So the next obvious transition is basic rate. We have a BRIM 2 and a BRIM 4. BRIM 2 doing 4 lines and a BRIM 4 doing 8 lines for ISDN 2. Then we have the LGCM, so that's an analog line module, so giving either 4 LGCM 4 or LGCM 8, giving 4 or 8 analog lines, again with caller ID built in, so there's not a special module, piece of software, key code to unlock caller ID, it's built in. And then we can expand our voicemail. There's a lot of customers, end users out there who use, for example, auto attendant heavily, so they have a lot of comfort messaging, a lot of initial announcements. So what we can do with IPECS is build a solution around their needs. So we start off with 6 ports, for example, in the MFIM 50, but the customer needs more ports, so we deploy a VMIM, and that gives us an extra 8 ports and 9 hours of recording time. And we get the total. We don't lose the first 6 ports, so in that experience, or that example, we would then have 14 ports worth of voicemail and auto attendant, and it's shared across voicemail and auto attendant. We then have the MSIM. The MSIM is the multimedia conferencing module. It's a 32 audio conferencing module that allows 32 participants to dial into an audio conference with a PIN code and have an audio conference. And obviously using the technology, you could record that audio conference, record as a WAV file and send it out. And then the last 2 modules, which I believe one of them to be the most important modules apart from the call server. We have SLTM modules, and they come in 4, 8 and 32 extensions, and these are analog extension modules. The one thing to bear in mind, the SLTM 32 is a rack mount module. It's 1.5U high, and that will allow you to connect to 32 analog extensions out of a single module. The SLTM 4 is a module that looks like the call server, and so is the 32, and looks is slightly different. And I'll show a case study later where the 32 extension, SLT extension module was actually the deal winner. That was the thing that won the deal because we used that with distributed architecture and gave the customer the solution they required. And finally, the DTIM. The DTIM supports 8 digital handsets. That's 8 LG digital handsets, and that's LDP 7000 series and LKD handsets. So that will support traditional LG handsets, and again has an important part to play in delivering a solution where you can't actually deploy IP phones and you have to deploy traditional digital telephones. Mounting options. I won't loiter too long on this. The second one down is the most popular by a million miles. A 1U single 19-inch rack mount per module. So you might have 4 modules in a solution. You can put each module in a single 19-inch rack mount, put them in the rack, 4U high, very neat solution. For bigger solutions, we have a 19-inch cabinet that will take 10 modules side by side, and that will either go in a wall mount or will actually go in a cabinet. And then down towards the bottom we have a single wall mount, so that's a plastic casing that allows you to mount a single module on the wall, and then we have bookends. Both are actually very important, and the single wall mount can actually be very, very important where you actually are using distributed architecture to its full. Handsets. Again, won't spend too long on that. Basically, in terms of IP handsets, IPECS Phase 5, so when we launched the M50 a few months ago, brought into play the new LIP 8000 series handsets. Okay, a brand new look for LG. From my perspective, great step for us because it's starting to look like a proper IP phone that a lot of IT people are actually looking for. But the great thing is, because of the way they're built, we can make it look like a digital phone as well by changing the way the backplate is mounted. 3 phones. We have the executive 24 button phone, the professional 12 button phone, and the standard 4 button display phone. Again, if you're going to write anything down today, the most important thing you could write down is that the 12 button phone and the 24 button phone is dual ported. What does that mean? That means that the customer can, using those phones, can have a single cable to the desk, and that single cable will do their data and their voice. So the cable coming from the LAN switch goes into the back of the phone, and the PC goes into the back of the phone. That's what we do at Capstan, and a lot of the IPECS that we're selling out there already are working in that way. And that functionality is driving more sales of the 12 button phone. The 4 button phone has a single port on the back, so not dual ported. Obviously 24 button, 24 flex keys, you can use those flex keys for shortcuts, busy lamp status, extension status, line status, shortcuts to voicemail, all the things that you're used to selling. And obviously we can add DSS modules. We have a choice of 3 DSS modules, 12 button DSS as a paper inlay, a 12 button DSS as an LCD inlay, and a 48 button DSS as a paper inlay. Now there are some rules regarding power and in terms of numbers you can have with each phone, and when you need to deploy a local power adapter. For example, on every 8048, so 48 button DSS, you must have a local power adapter. But another example is if you've only got a 12 button paper DSS, that will take its power from the IP handset. Another thing to note is that the DSS modules do not use up a port on the telephone system. Okay, so if you've got a 50 port solution, you've got 5 DSS modules across that system, they're not using your ports. They daisy chain onto the IP handset. So a bit different from traditional systems where you were using extension ports. DSS modules do not use extension ports. Probably quite obvious to many of you, but IP phones need power. Without power, they do not work. 2 basic options. You can use local power adapters, so the phones in the back can take a local power adapter that's £16 RRP that plugs into the phone, plugs into the mains, and will power that phone locally. But the preferred option for us, and probably for you guys as well, is for the customer to have a PoE LAN switch. You may sell that to the customer as part of your sale, and as part of your deployment, where the phone, the LAN switch, not only delivers the connectivity, but delivers the power out to the phones as well. Okay, the phones are not power hungry, so you don't have to worry about LAN switch exploding and all these sorts of things. We have views on what LAN switches to use, but we have no recommendations. You should use the LAN switches that you prefer and you're used to working with. There's no dictation that you've got to use a high-end LAN switch. So, distributed architecture, what does that really mean? Okay, down the bottom there we've got the message. As long as we have the LAN, we have the backplane. I've been to see many customers in the last 6 months where they've had very big telephone systems. And when I say big, I mean physically big. They've had whole rooms dedicated to house the telephone system. And when I've shown them the size of an M-Fin 100, M-Fin 300, it's blown them away. Now, because we're using the LAN, we can deploy this new type of technology using IP as the backbone, using the LAN as the backbone. But what does that really mean? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples, and these are real examples when I go to see a customer. I went to see a customer recently where they were looking to move their comms room, but the ISDN 30 was in the old comms room. And the traditional way of dealing with that was either to leave the telephone system in that old room and run loads of copper cable back to where the new cabinet is going to be for the patch panels, etc. Or, as we proposed, put the primary rate module close to the ISDN 30, plug the primary rate into the LAN, and then put your call server and the rest of your IPECS telephone system wherever you want it to be. So it can be in the comms room, which is 5 metres away or 55 metres away. Because we have the LAN, we have the telephone system backbone. And when BT turn around to the customer and say, yeah, we'll move your primary rate, but that's going to cost you £8,000 because we have to dig up the pavement, come in at the other side of the building, is that you're actually doing that in a far more efficient way. And when the customer realises what you've done, the customer will be delighted, because not only are you saving them money, but you're giving them a solution that suits their needs. So that's the example with primary rate. Another simple example is that you have a warehouse and you need analog extensions in that warehouse. Why now would you run all those analog extensions all the way from the call server, the telephone system in the IT room down to that warehouse? We can deploy an analog extension module in that warehouse, connect the phones locally, and they might be analog decked phones or fixed decked phones, fixed analog phones, and we plug the module into the LAN, and that gives us the connectivity back to the call server. Now, this is all distributed architecture in the building. Distributed architecture is not only about the building, but it's about the business. So customers can have multiple sites, and we can deliver distributed architecture. I know some of you on this webinar today have actually delivered these solutions already, where the customer has a wide area network and you have modules across that network that building a single business solution. So no longer are we looking at a site and saying one telephone system, we're actually looking at a customer and saying one telephone system. And with local survivability and redundancy, not only can we deliver that one telephone system, but we can give them the reassurance of some survivability if the network fails. So, end user terminal options. Well, on the top left there, we've covered off the IP phones, so that's the 8000 series IP phones, and many of you will know about digital phones, and again, many of you will know about analog phones. Important thing is we're delivering caller ID to those analog phones and message waiting status. In terms of all the other devices there, they are what I would call the new wave devices. Some of these devices have been out for some time, but have really taken off with the introduction of IPECS. So just running through them quickly, the wireless IP phone, Fontage, the IP soft phone for a laptop or a PC, Fontage for the PDA, Fontage for a Symbian device, and the web phone. Now I could spend probably the full hour talking about all these devices, and you probably have to see a lot of them in action to get a full understanding of what they can do and how they do it. I just want to give you a few examples of where I see people actually saying, this is the thing that I want. If you look at Fontage, the laptop or the PC-based soft phone, Fontage Deluxe has more features and more functionality than an 8024, so 24 button fixed IP phone. Okay, so it has more features, it has more keys, and you can do lots more with it. Simple call recording, these sorts of things. And we have seen systems ship in the last 3 months where there is more soft phones than fixed phones. And looking back 2 years, that would have been a scary thought. Well, that is becoming normal now, where customers are saying, well, does the customer actually need that user need a fixed phone? They're not a heavy user, they're a PC user, can they use a soft phone? And obviously if they're a remote worker, that phone goes wherever they are. So I'm a prime example of that, is that I'm never at home, I'm never at the Capstan office, but I have a soft phone and my extension is 144, so my DDI calls route out to that soft phone, and when it's connected, is that I get my calls. I have a simple headset, and it's just as good, if not better, than being in front of a fixed phone. So I have busy lamp status, so I can see when Mike and Trevor are on the phone in the office. I can send them internal SMSs from my soft phone, and they can reply using the fixed phone. The Wi-Fi phone is not a replacement to DECT. The Wi-Fi phone is aimed at somebody in a small office who wants some ability to move around. So somebody who wants to move around the office and be on a phone, or somebody who wants to be a home worker but neither wants to have a soft phone or wants to have a fixed phone at home. Alright, so they can move around the house, and it's not a fixed phone that's kind of ugly in terms of the house decor. The Fontage, we can run on a PDA and we can run on a Symbian device, so we have loads of different ways of delivering mobility. And finally, the web phone. The web phone gives your customer the ability to go to any PC in the world, enter a URL on Internet Explorer, and within 1 minute they will have their extension in front of them. So they didn't have special software, they didn't have a special device, they walked up to an internet cafe, a customer's PC, and they logged in. And some of you will have seen me demonstrate that, where I've walked up to your PC and I've actually logged into my extension at Captain and had the ability to dial an outside line and take calls if I wanted to. Just finally on this slide, I want to mention about remote workers. Remote workers don't only have to have a soft phone or a Wi-Fi phone. You can have remote workers who have a fixed IP phone. So you may have a customer who has 5 people who work a little bit from home. So that might be salespeople. So they could have an 8012 IP handset. And with a little bit of programming in the handset, they can take it home, plug it into their standard broadband, and as long as they've got enough bandwidth, is that they will have an IP extension of that telephone system. And they will be just like any other extension of the telephone system. So they'll have busy alarm status. They will have all the features they would have if they were sitting in the office. So we do really make that remote IP extension for that one-off, or those 5 workers, or that second site with 2 people, really, really simple. So that's me kind of covered off the infrastructure, so the MFIMs, the handsets, and how it all builds and how it's kind of different in terms of a traditional telephone system. I now just want to run through some of the features. Many of you have seen this slide before. This is actually an IPLDK slide. So this is the same auto attendant functionality that's built into the IPLDK. So 70 programmable announcements, multi-level, going up to something like 9 levels. We can route calls to extensions, to hunt groups, to announcements, and to speed dials. The most important thing about this slide is the thing I haven't read out, group voicemail. IPECS gives us group voicemail. So you can have, for example, a school where they have an absence line, and the auto attendant says, "Thank you for calling. If you want to report an absence, press 4, and that call doesn't actually go to a person. It goes to a group mailbox. And that call is answered to the group mailbox, and they have message waiting status on that group mailbox. So, and it's not just on one person, it's multiple persons. And we'll talk about how group mailbox works a little bit later. But we can have full group mailbox. So that's probably the most important part of that slide. But please remember that auto attendant that's there, for example, in the M550, 70 programmable announcements is really feature rich, especially when you actually look at the price of the system. Voicemail. Many users just want standard voicemail, and obviously IPECS delivers that, so each user can have a personalised greeting and can have different forward types. So that might be forwarding all calls, that might be forwarding just when I'm on the phone, or I'm no answer, or a mix of all 3. Okay, so that is a simple example, and that's the voicemail that we deploy in IPLDK. But key thing to remember, that you've bought the solution, you've got voicemail. It's down to you and the customer to decide how you deploy it. So it might be one user, and it might be every user on the telephone system. Is that what you don't have to worry about is that how much is it going to cost extra if I add an extra 10 extensions. As long as there's enough ports and recording time, you can sell additional voicemail to that customer. You may choose to charge for it, you may choose not to charge for it, but that's your choice. You've bought the hardware. And again, simple kind of voicemail basics. You can listen to your voicemail, you can delete them, you can save them. You can forward your voicemail from one extension to another. So for example, at Capstan, if I get a voicemail on extension 144, I can forward that from my soft phone, from my voicemail, to somebody else in the system's voicemail. So if somebody called me with a marketing question, is that looking for some marketing support, I can take that voicemail and forward it to Mike's extension in the system, and it will leave my voicemail and go into his, and his message waiting will start flashing. You can message rewind and message CLI. So whilst listening to a voicemail, I can hit the callback button, and because the CLI is available, the system will automatically call that number back. I always bring this one out, the ability to do a direct transfer to voicemail greetings. You will have loads of customers who basically say, I want reception to have the ability to transfer a call directly to voicemail and my phone doesn't ring. And my phone doesn't ring because it's on a divert. My phone doesn't ring because reception decided I do not want to speak to that person. So that might be, for example, cold callers. I know you all do it, but cold callers for a lot of businesses are a nuisance, and receptionists want an easy way to deal with it. And that might be just transferring them to a voicemail box. That might be the school, where somebody phones up and for whatever reason gets through to the office and wants to report an absence. Let's transfer that call to the absence voicemail box. So that's direct transfer without a phone ringing. Message box access, put simply, your own extension, somebody else's extension, and anywhere in the world, from by dialing in, entering your authorization code and listening to your voicemail. And I'll talk in a little minute about the notification options. Obviously one of the basic notification options is a flashing LED, be it the message waiting lamp or a flex key on the handset. So what are those notification options? Now these are some of the most important improvements and advancements in terms of voicemail on IPECS. We have the ability with IPECS to have voicemail notification on any handset on the system, and beyond that on any flex key in the system. So you could have a director in a business, or 5 directors in a business where there's one secretary, and that secretary has access to their voicemail. So that secretary has 5 flex keys, 1 for each director, and when the voicemail is left for the director, not only does it flash on the director's flex key for their voicemail, it also has a dedicated flex key on the secretary's. And as long as they've got the PIN code, they can access it and they can delete it, they can save it, do all that sort of stuff. We can do out-dial notification, an out-dial notification on a per user basis. It's a bit like, for example, some of you will have O2 mobile phones, where O2 have a service where it will call you up every time you get a voicemail. It's exactly the same. So you can set up multiple retries, and you can set up a retry timer where it will call you up, it will announce you've got voicemail, it will ask for your PIN code, you'll enter your PIN code, and then it will play your voicemails as if you had called into your voicemail. So it'll ask you to delete them, save them, forward, all that sort of stuff. Again, all these things are built in the system. There's no special cost, extra fee. We also, as part of the MFIM50 and all the MFIMs now, apart from the MFIM 600 where it comes in the VMIM, we include email notification. Now some of you have heard me saying this. This is notification, not unification. I'll explain in a minute what that means. Is that what I do is that every time I get a voicemail from one of you guys and it comes in on our IPECS, is that I will get an email in my Outlook inbox, and that email will include the date and time, the caller ID, so I'll know where that the number that's called from, and I have the option to include the WAV file of that physical voicemail. So for example, some of you might leave me quite a funny voicemail, so I can forward it back to you and let's have a joke about that. Or some of you might call me and say, can you do this? Or how does this work? I can then forward that voicemail as part of an email directly to tech support. So for me, it's a very, very efficient way of managing voicemails. Okay, now that is included in the system. That might just be one user, or 2 users in the case of Capstan, because we're not a heavy voicemail user, or it's actually every user in the system. So that's using SMTP as a technology, is that connecting to an email server, and the email server sending the email out. Something we do, something I can demonstrate, and I'm sure when your customer understands what it is, and the fact that it's an included feature in the system, something you can sell heavily on. But the key thing to remember, notification, not unification. Although I'm getting that email with your voicemail, with that WAV file that I can play back, send on, is that I am still getting the voicemail on the system, and until I delete it in the system, it's always there. Okay, if I delete the email, it's not gone, it's still in the system. Group voicemail is that we can have dedicated voicemail for groups. You have a sales group, people can dial into that group, and they can have an announcement for the sales group. And then as mailbox notification, it can be any flex key on the system. So it could be group members, it could be the supervisors, or a mix of the two. So only supervisors could have access to the group mailbox for the sales group. You have all these options because it is full group voicemail. And the only thing I'd like to mention on this slide is the ability to upload WAV files as greetings. I'm sure you all have the situation where you go to a customer and you sit down with them and say, can you record your announcements? And they all feel very nervous, and they make mistakes and they swear and all those sorts of good things. They can pre-record their announcements as WAV file, either professionally or locally, and you can load them up onto the IPECS as their announcements. Mobile extension. This is an IPLDK feature. It's built into IPECS, alright? It's for use when you've got ISDN lines, ISDN2 or ISDN30 or SIP trunks. It's actually the most important feature, and it's built in. Many of the other vendors, as many of you know, charge many thousands of pounds for this feature. It is in every system we sell that's connected to ISDN lines. And put simply, the ability to connect your mobile phone, and that is any mobile phone, and actually any telephone number in the world, and pair it up with an extension, okay, a system extension, so an IP extension on IPECS. Now, what's so unique about that? It is called mobile extension for a reason, because it is an extension. You've paired up your mobile phone. So somebody calls my DDI, it calls my soft phone, and the call will then be connected out onto the mobile phone. And with the mobile phone, you have the ability to press star and hash. So star puts the caller on hold, they get music on hold as if you've done that in the system, and then you can transfer it. So when I'm out with you guys in front of customers, I normally do a little demo where I get them to call my DDI, it comes out onto my mobile phone, I press star, followed by 112 for Joe in the office, and I transfer that call from my mobile phone, as if I'd been sitting in front of a phone. So that's why it's called mobile extension. It works in the opposite way. If I call into the IPECS system here at Capstan, it recognises my number and says, hang on a minute, Scott's calling himself. So why is it doing that? And it gives me internal dial tone. And at that point, I can call anywhere in the world by pressing 9. What does that allow me to do? I can pretend to be in the office when I'm not in the office. Or if I've got that customer who just won't talk to me because they can see my CLI from my mobile phone number, is that I'll call into the Capstan, get internal dial tone, and it will come out through the Capstan switch with the Capstan CLI. The customer answers the call, and surprise, surprise, I've got them on the end of the phone. Okay, so just watch out for that, guys. Hunt groups. You probably all know about circular terminal ring, and a lot of you will know about ACD hunt groups, automatic call distribution. So delivering the call to the agent or the person in that group who's been off the phone the longest period of time. I probably want to say, first of all, ACD is not used enough, should be sold lots more. On the M550 we have 40 ACD groups. Alright, so with the ability to create 40 ACD groups. A great way of managing inbound calls, not just for the big call centres, but for the little ones as well. And you'll see an example of ACD a little bit later. Multiple hunt group membership. The great news is that IPECS allows us to have multiple hunt group membership, not just for the same group type. So in this really messy slide, what am I trying to say? That somebody can be a member of not just ACD groups, but they can be a member of ring groups and terminal groups all at the same time. So previously in IPLDK, if you were a multiple group member, you had to be all, for example, ring groups or all ACD groups. Now it doesn't matter, you can mix and match depending on how you want that group to work. And obviously, I know it's very obvious, but it's important to say, an individual's group calls and their personal internal calls and DDI calls do not get mixed up. So group calls don't go to voicemail and DDI calls don't disappear into the group somewhere. Skill-based routing. Very few of you will know that on IPECS, each agent in each group has up to 10 different skill levels. So on a rating between 0 and 9, we can rate each agent. So we can do some really detailed skill-based routing for either a big call centre or a 10-seat call centre where they've got 10 people of different skill sets and they want to prioritise calls to those with the right skill sets. So take a look at that. It's really important where you can actually give your customer something they perceive to be a high-end call centre solution. Now this is included, part of, free of charge, the M550, all for £710 RRP. And we can deliver a wallboard solution. This is the first example of Sidetrack, where one of the case studies I'll show you in a moment basically says, well, the customer needs a wallboard. They've got 15 agents. They need to know at all points what's going on, how many calls they've had, how many calls in the queue, is that how many agents available. Simple wallboard. And when they meet thresholds, they flash, go green, go red, make noises, all the things you'd expect from a wallboard. So by using ACD and a wallboard together, you deliver that call centre solution. Okay, and this is how it works in real life. Okay, this is what a call centre solution would look like. So you'd have comfort announcements, you would have all the queuing, the options to leave messages in group mailboxes, the options to route off on a speed dial, all these things. Then timed overflows, so call goes in, and then after 2 minutes worth of waiting, it goes somewhere else, so that the customer's call is managed in the most efficient and the most customer-friendly way. So what's new about the Hunt Group features on IPECS? I'll just bring out a couple. IPECS includes position and queue announcement, real-time position and queue announcement. So after every comfort announcement, so there might be a comfort announcement every 30 seconds, we have a position and queue announcement, all right, that will say to the caller, you are first in the queue, you are third in the queue. So that will be real-time based on the queue stats. We obviously have group mailbox. We have queue page alert, where you can set a threshold in the queue to say, well, when I get 5 calls in the queue, page the 2 supervisors with a pre-recorded paging announcement that says, the queue is very busy, can you ask some agents to log in? Okay, so we have that again built in. And we also have caller ID based routing, where if you've got a problem customer, or your customer's got a problem customer, they can type into the programming the number of that customer, and that will automatically route that caller to a certain part of your business. So for example, somebody hasn't paid the bill, put their number into the IPECS, and it will route them to the accounts department every time. Hot desking IPLDK feature. Hot desking is built into all IPECS system. Users log in with a password, log out with a password. When they log out, calls can forward to voicemail, to their mobile phone, and it has been really useful in bigger solutions where the customer has wanted a true hot desking solution, so the flexibility that any user can use any handset in the system by just entering a PIN code and walking up to that handset. Now I always use this slide whilst in front of IT managers. Okay, easy web-based programming. IT people want to be able to program the IPECS, but what's critical is the ability to say to you and to the end user, we will only give you access to what you need to see. So for example, the IT manager might want just to change the group membership and the names on the system. Well, you would give them access, authority to those programming items, so they wouldn't have access to all the things they potentially could break. Now I want to finish off with 3 simple case studies. Okay? Case study number 1. College campus. Traditionally had 2 telephone systems, site A 100 users, site B 30 users. Looking for a new telephone system. Is that they'd made a decision to go IP, and they would have 1 telephone system across those 2 sites. So that's fine, IPECS would do that brilliantly well. They've got a big wide area network. They could have all 130 users connected to an FM 300. Okay, and that's what they got. But through the sales process, we identified that, hang on a minute, at site B, what happens when you lose the network connectivity to site A? Your users have no telephone system, and telephone's the most important part of your business. So they actually ended up buying an FM50B for that second site. But it was run in local survivability mode, which means that most of the time it didn't do anything. The local phones in site B connected back to the FM 300 as one solution, but when the network failed, automatically that call server, that FM50B in site B, took over using the local lines for local breakout. So they ended up buying 2 telephone systems, but it looks like 1 telephone system, and they've got resilience. So site B can survive and run as if it had run if it was a dedicated telephone system. So again, simple sale is the customer wanted one thing, thought it was 1 telephone system, really think they've got 1 telephone system, but they've got some resilience built into the solution. Case study 2, an out-of-hours NHS service for 90 GP surgeries. Okay, main site, little call centre, they've got 15 agents in that call centre, and they've got 50 users on it. It's an FM50, an FM100. Okay, They're using auto attendant, they're using full ACD, so they've got agent login using the SideTrack interface, and they've got a real-time wallboard for the queue and all that sort of good stuff. And that's a call centre solution. But you know what? That's not what sold the solution. And the bit that sold the solution is the bit up in the top right. This out of hours NH service has 5 GPs who go out and see patients in the evenings. But they do some triage in advance of going to see patients, but they have a legal requirement to record that call, but they don't want to be in the call centre during the night. So they now have the ability to do that from a mobile phone or the landline at home. How do they do that? Because we're using those extensions as mobile extensions. They call into the telephone system on a dedicated DDI. The system recognises them. It says, this is a mobile extension, I will give this caller dial tone. At that point, they call the patient, and that allows them to do line-side call recording on that call. Meet the legal requirement, but be far more efficient. Instead of having 5 GPs in the call centre 24 hours a day, they've got 5 GPs who are on call. Okay? Mobile extension was free. It was part of the system, and that's what sold it. Yeah, it was a nice little call centre solution, but what sold it was the part of the system, the feature that actually was built in, is that just thinking about it and delivering in a slightly different way. And the last one, very simply, is that 5-star hotel, this is true distributed architecture. So MFIM 300, primary, all the standard hotel stuff, attendant consoles, but the hotel was built on a fibre backbone. They didn't want to run copper wire all the way from the comms room all the way to the bedroom phones. 3 analog extensions in each bedroom. So what was the solution? Let's use distributed architecture. Let's build the LAN and put the SLTM32, so those analog extension modules, in the floors, so up locally to the bedrooms, and run the copper wire locally. Okay, so that's distributed architecture. That's a function of IPECS. But it wasn't a telephone system feature that sold that system. It was the ability to deliver the infrastructure and meet and work with the infrastructure needs of that 5-star hotel. So very traditional in terms of the voice functionality, but a true distributed architecture. And a 5-star hotel is that we're just doing it in a slightly different way than normal. So, I think this is the second last slide. Is it all really in the bundle? You all have seen, and I won't talk about it too much, us talking about our famous MFIM 50 bundle, and you all keep on asking me when will it finish, and I'll keep on telling you I won't tell you. Anyway, it is true, is that many of you bought it, is that we have the special MFIM 50 bundle. What does it have? 6 IP phones, a 24 button and a 12 button. Is that 2 try before you buy soft phones. Because it's an MFIM 50, it's got 4 lines built in, it's got 2 analog extensions built in, it's got 4 SIP trunks built in, it's got 50 ports that are all available to you to use, voicemail and auto attendant built in. It is a full call centre solution, so all those call centre things I've spoken about are in that box. It's got a mobile extension in that box, and you don't have to worry, you're not stuck with it. Is that if the customer suddenly goes from 30 extensions to 60 extensions, you don't have to rip out the entire solution and start again. You can take out the MFIM 50 and put in an MFIM 300. Is that because it is one level of infrastructure, so you just swap out your call server and you have a new solution. So all is really in the bundle, and that bundle is available today.
Connecting life's experiences.